from quotas. Numerous research have identified the fact that caste influences not only the skills required by an individual to qualify in a highly competitive exam like JEE or GATE, but also their ability to adapt to the academic system and integrate with the dominant culture of these institutes. Pedagogical and mental support systems, which are required to support these discriminated groups, are more or less absent in these institutions, while wired interviews, open discriminatory practices are a common occurrence during the selection of PhD candidates. According to the recent report submitted by HRD Ministry in response to a question from Elamaran Karim and K. Somprasad of the CPM, the average representation of SCs, STs, and OBCs in the PhD programs across all 23 IITs during the last 5 years have been 9%, 2.1%, and 23% respectively, as against 15%, 7.5%, and 27% that is mandated by the law. These actions not only discriminate against a community, but also has the potential to discourage entire communities from participating in a process through which they could achieve economic and social mobility. The recently released data from IIT Bombay also exposes the much poorer departmental level representation of these categories. Student organizations such as SFI have intervened in this issue and have asked for transparency in the selection process. They have also demanded a commission to look into these discrepancies, and the MHRD is yet to present the study report of the committee. It is in these circumstances that we are conducting these events. This will be the third lecture on a series of talks organized by both the APSC and the ChintaBAR. APSC stands for Ambedkar Periyar Study Circle. And we have hosted eminent scholars like Ajanta Subramaniam, Sona Jaria Means, and Deepak Malgan in the previous lectures. So the event will begin with an initial address by P.K. Biju, which will be followed by an address by Dr. Abasur, and we request the speakers to not exceed 30 minutes. And this will be followed by a question and answer session. And the participants are requested to type their questions in the chat box, and we will be asking them. Also, all participants are required to switch off their microphones and turn on their video, because participants are not off their mics even after the host will be forced to remove from the meeting. In the question answers for the questions, you're requested to type them in the chat box. We'll be also circulating a Google form in the chat box, and we request friends and alumni of IITs concerned about the inclusion and diversity in IITs to fill the same. Again, due to emergencies, Dr. P.K. Biju has requested us to allow him to leave early, and I invite P.K. Biju to give his address.
Thank you. I think Mr. K.J. Anandan, he presided this meeting. First of all, I feel immensely privileged to be invited to deliver a lecture on the issue of underrepresentation of SC, ST, OBC in our premier higher education institutions in science and technology in India. I'm also appreciating the organizers, ChintaBAR, to select such a topic that has profound relevance in the contemporary political context. Discrimination in campuses varies from physical exclusion to a more subtle denial of entitlement and to seemingly neutral practices that disproportionately affect Dalit and backward communities students. Several official bodies set up to investigate allegations of discrimination in higher education institutions have found evidence of caste-based discrimination. The situation is more severe in the science and technology institution. Even though various inclusive policies like reservations in higher education institution has been introduced, their underrepresentation in India's eminent scientific research institution still remains to be vexing reality. These institutions, for the most part, are notorious for openly endorsing and practicing communalism and casteism, which subsequently lead to the marginalization of Dalit, SC, ST, OBC from acquiring scientific knowledge and empirical insight. As a result, a pernicious from the knowledge-centered divide comes into being. This knowledge-centered divide plays an instrumental role in the retention of all tenets of casteism. It carries the casteist logic within itself that the knowledge acquisition is the sole domain reserved only for the upper caste. Here, knowledge transforms into an exclusionary tool instead of being a source of enlightenment. As long as the upper caste in the premier higher education institution monopolize it, the upper caste monopoly of knowledge is certainly the main reason for the underrepresentation of backward and lower caste in the areas of higher learning in science, medicine, engineering, technology, etc. It is evident that science in India in general and the scientific institutions of higher learning in the country in particular have a caste character. Throughout the history of our nation, caste prejudice and caste-based atrocities had a prominent place. And even today, the ghost of caste still haunts Indian humanity. Cutting across the religious and cultural lines, the ghost of caste threatens the communal amity. It put the social cohesion between the majorities and minorities into a state of critical impasse. In the land of Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Ambedkar persistently strived for the abolition of the caste system. We now have instances or have direct experiences of caste discrimination, particularly in education institutions. Are we living in a state of paradox? And why our society is still wrestling with the ghostly appearance of caste? This sorry state of affairs is highly condemnable. In India, the generic scientific is still largely perceived to Brahminical. The domination of the upper caste scientists have given a Brahminical identity to science in India. They have been perceived to be inheritors of scientific practice and people endowed with the scientific consciousness. In the West, all good scientists are politically to the left of the center and non-believers of religion. But in India, things seem upside down. The scientist who study evolution actually believes in heavenly creation. This early entry into Western education and their knowledge of English, it was upper caste who benefited, reshaped and negotiated these new norms, forms of knowledge. The redefinition of and negotiation with Western education allowed them to not merely accept Western science, but accept it without compromising their cultural norms. This acceptance and negotiation made Brahmins inheritors of knowledge. The caste stratification of Indian society has ensured that the most well-regarded and competitive institutions of higher education, like Indian Institute of Technology, continue to be space for caste privilege and pathways to diasporic success. While there has been some shift in the social composition of such institutions because of the reservations, these changes have yet to make a noticeable impact on the most elite institutions. Now let us look to the kind of ideology that the scientists promote in the realm of learning science. Science, being an established from the knowledge system, is objectival and neutral, in which social identities play no part. However, in the Indian scenario, science is the exclusive realm of Brahmins and upper caste. They use science as a tool for giving scientific justification and meaning to their social identities. As a result, science loses its objectivity. What is actually taking place here is nothing else but the upper caste scientific affirmation of subjectivity, and not certainly to promotion of science and scientific temper. Professor M.N. Srinivas, in his book on Sanskritization, clearly point out how Brahmins and upper caste use and manipulate science and scientific technologies for promoting their culture, customs, histories, and identities. The televisation of Ramayana is a good example of this, according to Dr. Professor Srinivas. Now let us turn our attention to the case of underrepresentation of lower caste in the realm of faculty position in many eminent institutions of scientific and management learning in India. There are no faculty members in 12 of the total 20 Indian Institute of Managements in the country, stated by the Human Resource Development Minister in the Parliament in November 2019. The annual report of Indian Institute of Science 2070 and 2080 shows that it has a total number of 434 academic faculties, of which Dalit and OBC constitute only 18. That means 4.15%. So data from the previous year and also underscore the lack of representation of SC, ST, and OBC scientists. They are not even merely 5% of the total scientific community at Indian Institute of Science. Available data from the leading scientific and technical institutions such as Indian Institute of Technology also show the absence of Dalit and OBC scientists. As informed to the Parliament recently, of 6,043 faculty positions across various IITs, only 2.3% belong to scheduled caste and 0.3% to scheduled tribe. The IIT have mostly been provided reservation to Dalit, tribals, and OBCs in faculty hiring, but only entry level, that is assistant professors. Underrepresentation of SC, ST, OBC amongst the faculty adversely impact to the academic life of students and research scholars from these groups. Brahmins and other upper caste groups continue to dominate in their all of these professions and culturally shape the institutions of modern professions based on their caste identities and markers. Likewise, the institutionalized form of caste discrimination becomes a routine thing in the campuses of science and technology education, such as Indian Institute of Technology, which run from the taxpayers' money. As we know, 90% of the budgetary allotment goes to these government higher education and higher learning institutions. The lower caste students face considerably discrimination right from their joining higher institutions of learning. The teaching staff, mostly from upper caste, do not support Dalit, Adivasis, or OBCs, and both educationally and economically. They set high parameter for awarding grades, which marginalized sections find hard to match. The data provided by the Ministry of Human Resource Development shows that 2,461 drop out from Indian Institute of Technology, 1,171, around 47.5% were from SC, ST, and other backward classes OBCs in the last 2 years. For example, 11 out of Indian institutions, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, 26 departments and centers did not admit single PhD scholar from the scheduled tribe ST category between 2015 and 2019. This is the data received under RTI. While almost 50% of the seats at IIT are for students from reserved categories, ST, SC, and other backward castes, less than 30% of these selected for PhD programs at Indian Institute of Bombay between 2015 and 2019 were from these categories. So this is a clear case of victimization. A total of 82,277 students applied for admission to PhD programs in 26 departments of Indian Institute of Bombay between 2015 and 2019. 2,874 selected, 71.6% were from the general category, 1.6% were from SC category, ST category, and 7.5% were SC category, and 19.2% were from the OBC category. Of the total application received in 5 years, only 1.8% were from candidate from ST, 10.7 from SC, and 21.8 from OBC category. This has happening almost all the higher learning institutions. The reserved category students also face discrimination from the general category students. They are frequently harassed, citing their enrollment in college under quotas. This also influences the dropout of reserved category students. Many students have committed suicide on ground of harassment and abuse by upper caste. So I had a personal experience. I was a member of the MHRD committee and also SC/ST welfare committee in standing committee in the parliament. I had personally contacted number of students and convey their feelings, their discrimination they're facing their respective institutions. In 2009, the committee headed by former UGC chair Sukhdev Thorat surveyed half of the SC/ST students at All India Institute of Medical Science. It found evidence of informal segregation in AIMS hostel, with SC/ST students being forced to shift into certain hostels following harassment, abuse, and violence by dominant caste students. SC/ST students reported that they faced social isolation in dining rooms or sports fields and at cultural events. Students also told that the Thorat Committee about discrimination by teachers, which took the form of avoidance, contempt, non-cooperation, and discouragement and differential treatment. In a way, this sort of predominance of upper caste in domain of faculty position is unconstitutional, because according to the previous provisions of the Constitution, all government institutions are mandated to provide 50% reservation for scheduled caste and 7.5% of scheduled tribe and 27% for other backward castes, OBCs. Further, it is also worth noticing here that the DOPT, being the central nodal agency entrusted to look into matters of reservation, had in its 1975 order sought to exempt scientific and technical posts from the reservation policy. The new education policy is another step to subvert the reservation. The draft national education policy breaks constitutional structures and values, promotes commercialization, and politicizes educational system by centralizing all aspects of it. Besides a few stray mandatory mentions of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBCs, the national education policy does not touch upon caste-based oppression in education. The preliminary issue here is the lack of any mention of reservation. Instead, the policy tracks the issue generally between the small offering of scholarship and assistance to the meritorious underprivileged. What is the most depressing fact that is the present BJP government's ideological stance towards science and technology is important in this context. They have no understanding on the scientific temper ensured in our constitution. Not too long ago, Minister of Science and Technology Harshavardhan formed a high-level committee to undertake research and to promote benefits of Panchagavya. This Panchagavya is the mixture of cow urine, dung, milk, curd, and ghee, as we know. IIT Delhi will be the nodal institution for research on this. There are reports that the Madhya Pradesh government has planned to set up Astro OPD consultation centers where astrologers will be giving predictions about their illness to the patients. This is planned to be done under the aegis of the state-sponsored institution in Bhopal. The Uttarakhand government, in collaboration with the Ayush of the Ministry of Health, has started the hand of magical Sanjeevani Buddhi. This is the mythological herb was one for which Lord Hanuman had to fly with the mounted as Lord Rama's younger brother Lakshman had become unconscious, as we know. The prestigious Indian Institute of Kharagpur is not only planning to introduce Vastu Shastra in their undergraduate teaching program, but also have a center for Vastu Shastra to advise people to install the statue of Lord Ganesh and Lord Hanuman in front of their houses to ward off evil. These policies are outcome of the understanding which the RSS-inspired BJP leaders have. Just a couple of years ago, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, while inaugurating modern hospital in Mumbai, drew the attention of his audience to the great strides which India had made in ancient times. He said, "We can feel proud of what our country achieved in medical sciences at one point of time." We all read about Karna in Mahabharata. If we think a little more, we realize that Mahabharata says Karna was not born from his mother's womb. This means that genetic science has present at that time. That is why Karna could be born outside her mother's womb. We worship Lord Ganesha. There must have some plastic surgeon at that time who got an elephant head grafted on the body of Hanuman, body of a human being, and began to practice of plastic surgery. So mythology is becoming the basis of science in India today. While mythology has the beauty of fiction, to place it in the realm of proven fact defines the scientific spirit, the spirit of scientific temper. No doubt, India has made a massive contribution to science in the form of contribution of Susut, Charak, and Aryabhat. But to claim that science was subservient in an ideological manipulation to construct our greatness, ideologues of freedom movement came to lay special emphasis on the development of scientific temper as the foundation of India that was enriched in our constitution. Today, Hindu nationalists occupying the seats of power and out to destroy the gain of scientific achievement during the last 7 decades and bring in faith-based fantasies in the area of scientific inquiry, knowledge, and technology. This is a retrograde move. But there is a ray of hope in the darkness that the students in our premier science and technology institutions have started questioning and reacting to the hegemonical RSS BJP regime. It is a matter of great interest that many IIT students come open and protested against the Draconian Citizenship Amendment Bill in 2019, after it was passed in 2019. We should continue our fight to ensure that Dalit or Adivasis or OBCs are not denied the right of education in institutions of excellence. I would like to thank again ChintaBAR to inviting me to attend this prestigious seminar. I hope you will continue this fight with the new space for communication, and will continue your fight. Thank you, warm regard, very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was really enlightening. Now, Dr. P.G, due to his emergency, won't be available with us for question and answer session. Now, I invite Dr. Abbas sir to give her address.
Do you want Dr. Biju to answer questions before, since he won't be here? Maybe, or do you want me to start?
Actually, sir informed us that he will be quite busy, so I request you to start that.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm delighted to be here with you, and
So, really sorry, ma'am. So I have to attend one political meeting here. Election is going on. I have to attend one evening meeting today. So allow me to go for that meeting. So nice to meet you, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes, and have a productive meeting. All right. We'll meet some other time.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So I want to, take off from where Dr. Biju left. He was talking about the ways in which ideology and politics have entered scientific institutions, and I would say that they never were bereft of it. They always were part and parcel of it. But the question today that you raised about need for democratic representation in science is a very real one. And the question that I want to address is, how do we go about doing it? And for this, we need to really understand the way in which science itself perpetuates these inequalities. What I mean by that is that if one studies the institutions of science, we find that there is a self-representation of the scientists and science itself that we need to think about. Now, if you look at any biography of an upper caste scientist, they will begin, especially, largely Brahminical scientists, they will begin by, espousing how rich their lineage is. It doesn't matter whether they were directly descendant of that lineage or not, but they must try and connect themselves to that lineage. And so time and time again, you would have, the castes of scientists is very prominently displayed in these biographies. Not only is that displayed, their caste, and if they can't find a lineage to very illustrious people, then they would say, oh, this place is full of Brahminical traditions and knowledge. And so for Raman, for instance, comes from Tanjore district, used to be called Tanjore, and they would say how that was a spring of, great literate men, etc., and Raman is following in their wake. Similarly, you look at any biography of a Brahmin scientist, the first thing you will come across is that they are Brahmins. And it is very problematic, in my opinion, because Brahmins are not only knowledge makers, they occupy other professions as well. In fact, Ramanujan, the great mathematicians of our times, his father was a clerk in a thing, but the need to assert the link with education and Brahminism is extraordinarily deep. And it kind of creates a culture of science where the more they talk about it, the more they are embodied with this virtue of learning, etc. And by contrast, then others do not have that virtue. And it is especially true for, if you look at women scientists and scientists of subaltern backgrounds, Dalit scientists, etc., they have to hide their heritage more or less. They cannot speak about the kind of discrimination they felt or they were subjected to within scientific institutions, etc. They have to keep their identities quite hidden in some ways, or pretend that these are completely normalized times. Their stay in these institutions was, as normal as anybody else's. And I have written about it a lot in my book, Dispersed Radiance, where I do a parallel study of C.V. Raman and Meghnad Saha. And I discuss not only how their science was influenced by their caste backgrounds, but also the ways in which they suppressed, in the case of Meghnad Saha, suppressed their subaltern identity and immersed himself completely in nation building, etc. Which is, he was absolutely a great scientist and a great human being. But if you were to read the scientific biographies about Meghnad Saha, including his own, the way his this biography that was written under his own supervision, there is absolutely no mention of caste and caste discrimination. In fact, as Dr. P.G. was telling us about the ways in which the religion is coming back into sciences in a very big way, and Meghnad Saha, in fact, had critiqued, very mild critique, saying that how artisanal classes and castes have not been allowed into science, and which has led to Indian science being really hampered because there's a lot of innovation. And he gives example from Western science where such was not the case. And he was just embroiled in such a huge controversy just because he suggested that there is this discrimination. So what I what I argue in that in my book is that the culture of science is such that certain voices are suppressed, and there is self-surveillance on the part of Dalit scientists, on the part of subaltern scientists, women scientists, because if there is no space allowed in this so-called objective field to talk about the subjective experiences, which are quite different. And as Dr. Biju also, told us about the ways in which the atmosphere in these institutions is so repressive. And, so you have, I'm sure you've seen these very moving documentaries called Death of Merit, where, we see a number of people who are unable to cope with the hostility and discrimination meted out to them. And one of the scholars here actually has talked about Kianga Yamahata Taylor. She's a professor in Princeton University, and when she was talking about race and race discrimination, she talks about what she calls predatory inclusion. What she means by predatory inclusion is inclusion at a very high cost to people of, that are, that the subaltern people, when they are invited to be included, when they are included in the institutions, they have a huge price to pay for that. And so here I just wanted to sort of talk about the ways in which, talking to a blank screen is a very tough thing for me. But anyway, let me go on to say, science itself, so you have the hierarchy of castes that, I referred to a little bit. There is also a hierarchy in sciences where, more mathematical sciences are considered to be at the higher rung. And there, of course, the ways in which science, let me actually, sorry, I'm getting a bit, I just want to read you a tiny section which might convey what I'm trying to say better. While caste appears prominently in biographies of upper caste scientists, the biographies of scientists like Meghnad Saha eschew it altogether, except to underscore the hardships suffered by them during childhood and youth. The importance of Saha in Indian science has elicited a number of analytical essays and a host of personal memoirs from his former students and colleagues. Saha also figures prominently in essays on scientific institutions in India and in biographies of other luminaries in Indian science. There is an underlying sense in almost all the biographies of Meghnad Saha that caste prejudice ceased to matter once he entered the hallowed halls of science. His social and political interactions after his appointment as a professor of physics at the University of Calcutta and then at Allahabad University are judged entirely through the lens of interpersonal rivalries and petty jealousies. Caste evaporates from the scene altogether. There is an implicit asymmetry in the biographical essays on Saha and those on other prominent scientists. While personal frailties of upper caste scientists invariably invoke understanding and deference, Saha, as we have seen, was judged harshly time and time again. Saha's reluctance to make public the social difficulties in which he often found himself inexorably bolsters the perception that academic institutions are free of prejudice. It's been written that the development of a self capable of scrutinizing its action is an ambivalent legacy of the Enlightenment, for it describes not only the rational self formed through self-regulation, but also the prisoner who, although subject to surveillance, learns to monitor himself. What I'm trying to say again and again, I think I'm sorry for repeating myself, is that there is no room in scientific institutions for women and subalterns to speak about their experiences, because science casts itself as sublime and pure. The casting of physics as pure and sublime is not unlike the self-representation of the Brahmins. Physics reigns supreme in the hierarchy of sciences, and its characterization as a highbrow, objective, and abstract knowledge demands that its practitioners erase subjective experience, ideological biases, and social difference from their considerations. These constraints, however, function only for the subaltern. The biographies of upper caste scientists are invariably reinforcers of ideologies of caste, hierarchy, and power. Indeed, hierarchies of gender and caste and those of science ensured the compliance of women and so-called low caste scientists in keeping the domain of physics unsullied, unencumbered by inventories of discrimination. It should come as no surprise that women scientists and Dalit scientists often choose to bury their grievances. Pandian has argued that Indian modern, despite its claim to be universal, and of course because of it, not only constitutes lower caste as its other, but also inscribes itself silently as upper caste. Thus, the survival of the subaltern in the disciplines of the quintessentially modern sciences is incumbent upon silencing the language of caste, as well as demanding and enforcing that caste can live only secret lives outside the public sphere. Saha had incurred the ire of upper caste firsthand when he made a rather mild criticism of the Hindu religion and the caste system in a lecture delivered at Shantiniketan in 1938. His main point was that craftsmen, artists, and builders have been traditionally placed quite low in the social hierarchy, which had engendered a lack of innovativeness in the techniques of production. Saha's lecture prompted a scathing response from someone called Anil Baran Roy, accusing Saha of misleading interpretations. Although Saha held his own and more in a series of rejoinders, the very fact that his opinions were publicly rebuked substantiates Pandian's argument that language of caste may only reside in private domain. So what I'm trying to say to you is that in culture of science, if you look at the ways in which science is practiced, there is a kind of banishment of any talk about discrimination, whether it is gender discrimination or caste discrimination. And unless then we are able to have large adequate representation where people feel comfortable talking about the ways in which the society has sanctioned these practices is essential if we want to be able to have a more democratic space in science. So we need to tell stories about our experiences, and we need to also be able to talk about things that are uncomfortable. It's always been a shock to me. It always, sort of surprises me endlessly that those who are the oppressors feel no shame. The shame is then transferred onto the people who are oppressed. Why is it that I as a woman cannot speak in the sciences? I have a science background, but there was not enough, we weren't made comfortable to talk about our own experiences in the laboratory. Many people feel that they are in effect shut out from these, and there is quite a high level of attrition also. So we have a problem of not inviting many people to begin with in the scientific institutions. And then on top of it, when there is over discrimination, the women and subaltern scientists are denied the space to actually air their grievances. So we need to, there is a dire need to change that. I mean, I teach in women's studies at MIT now, and but if you looked at the representation of Black faculty within MIT, it's less than 3%. Which is, and it hasn't changed in a decade. And but things are, we do have, programs and institutions set up to provide support to people. And yet, if they don't see role models, if they don't, if there is a general hesitance on the part of the institution as a whole to discuss these problems, the situation is not going to change. And so in recent years, of course, you may have also heard about this big movement, Black Lives Matter. 4 years ago, or a bit more than that, when Black Lives Matter came prominently on the screen, there was not that much discussion of it at the highest level of the institutions. But now, in last few months, last year, there's been a heightened response by the MIT administration, and I think the rest of the institutions also, to actually tackle seriously the issue of racial discrimination in this country. And I bring this up mainly to think through as to what might change in India, because in India, I understand that there is still huge reluctance to, in fact, discuss issues of discrimination faced by subalterns. So in some ways, there are public policies that can make a big difference. Or despite public policies, as we saw Dr. Biju tell us, that despite these policies, the numbers of people, of subaltern scientists and engineers is abysmally low in these institutions. So the question is, okay, I've lost my train of thought. So how will that change is the question, right? So one of the things is that there has to be public awareness, and we have to coordinate and merge our concerns about lack of representation in science with the larger world of where there is a lot of atrocities that go on in all around us. And unless we are able to create create a joint opposition to what's happening outside of scientific institutions with what's happening in scientific institutions, I think we are going to have a very hard time changing hearts and minds. My earlier remarks, which I'm sorry were so disjointed in a way, were trying to say how science, how there is no room. What I wanted to say was that there is a de facto association with intelligence and merit, etc., with upper caste. And the biographies actually reinforce that for us, because they keep, that's why this whole emphasis on talking again and again or about caste background is to establish that there is almost, sort of intrinsically Brahmins are with merit, and those on the subalterns are lack merit. That is taken for granted in this scenario in higher education, and nobody questions that. No, I mean, and how do we then? I'm sure Ajanta talked a lot about how merit gets associated with upper castes. And and as a result, we are seeing, and it perpetuates in so many ways. It's only in India, and I learned it from Ajanta's book, where as to how, or maybe some other studies also, where the first question people are asked when they go for interview after an engineering degree is, what was your rank? The rank of when you were accepted in IIT. And that, because they want to know what your caste is really. It's not about how you did, what your grade point average was or whatever, because that may be a more equalizing way to think about things. But this harkening back to, trying to ascertain whether or not you were from reserved category or not, is itself a way to perpetuate this notion that only the upper castes have merit. Right? And we have to really, really question that and really have a joint opposition to that kind of thinking. How we do that is to actually have to have coalitions with other groups who are fighting on class, gender, caste, all kinds of issues. We have to bring them together. And of course, class and caste are quite intrinsically related. And so unless we are able to expand our horizons to not just be confined to what science and scientific institutions are doing, make broader alliances with other people, we are not going to be able to solve the problem. One of, when I was reading earlier Ambedkar's, interventions, and he felt that the reservations will go away in 10 years, because if you create a level playing field, things should work out fine. And it is precisely because Indian government has spent very little money and time and energy in trying to create good schooling, government schooling in, wherever there's been good, schooling, people have done well. But by and large, the government has put all, most of the money disproportionately into tertiary education and not in building really fine schools that can educate people properly, that can make them, sort of be ready to enter the universities and technical institutions. So we need to fight for better schooling. We have to fight against this mindset, which again is, Meghnad Saha called it intellectual dishonesty, which is again something that Dr. Biju was talking to us about, as to how religion has entered all in a very deleterious manner, sort of where again the ways in which merit and castes are interlinked through religion, also is very deleterious. Is deleterious to making any long-lasting change. Finally, yes, I think I might just stop here, and I think it'll be much better if I can see some faces and talk to people rather than just look at myself. All right, I may stop here, and maybe we can discuss this more.
Thank you, ma'am. We have been trying to get this video unblocked, but actually it's not happening due to bandwidth and connectivity issues.
Yeah,
so
it's just hard for me to speak to a blank screen, you know. So yeah.
So also I request everyone present in this discussion to not turn on their videos. I know ma'am has requested for this, but actually it's not possible at the time. If everyone turns on their videos, it might lead to connectivity issues for people who have low connectivity, and at times this could crash also. So given these problems, I request people to not turn on their videos. Ma'am, can we move on to the question session now?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. From the side of the organizers, I have 2 questions. So, ma'am, you talked about how this, how in an interview in India, one of the questions that surfaces a lot is about the reservation, if whether you are from a reserved category, or about your rank, or about whether you have access to reservation, or whether you are from a public university. So, ma'am, these are also things which were pointed out by Subde Thorat and all in their writings on private sector and private institutions. So how do you think this neoliberal policies and privatization has impacted representation in these STEM institutions?
So the private industry is not under any, they're not obliged to have any quota or any reservation, right? In India?
Private secretary, the private industry doesn't acknowledge the need for reservations. They have even gone to the extent of saying that caste does not represent a problem in modern India. So, how do you perceive that issue?
I don't think it's fully clear. I think RT does apply to private schools, right? I don't know about reservation, but the RT quota still works for private schools, especially, and that's where all the ruckus happened. So I'm not sure if they're required.
We are actually talking about the private sector, private enterprises.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And how neoliberal policies in general have affected the representation in STEM institutions?
So I think the major problem here is, as we have seen, in terms of at least the faculty hiring that you sort of sent me that data, and Dr. Biju talked about it also, as to how they are severely underrepresented, even in the government institutions, right? So what you're asking me is how do neoliberal policies further complicate this plan? Right, this project of to be more inclusive.
Yes, ma'am. Exactly.
Yeah. I think. I mean, you see, it's that in my head, at least, and I know more now. I've lived in the US for so long that I know more about it here than elsewhere. Is that there is a revolving door policies. There's a tight connection between the state and private enterprise, right? The state is very partial to that enterprise, and we are seeing this farmers' education, which is all about trying to create market, a sort of trying to remove whatever surety there was for, that there'd be some minimum price for their crop, so they'll have to be in the open market. So I mean, that kind of so it's in that sense of what in my head is what they try to sell us, is that these are all merit-based. So if you can succeed, you will, there is no other discrimination. We don't discriminate on the basis of gender and caste. But the reality is that there is huge discrimination. There is, it's not clear to me whether it's, so the way in which in my head I can relate it to is the privatization of education, where if you want to get a good education, you must pay for it. The state has reneged its responsibility of providing decent education. I mean, here you have to probably go back and look at the states where there has been a decent education, right? And how have they fared? Maybe Kerala might be a good example. I honestly don't know. Whereas I can tell you about where I live. The schools make a huge difference. There are government schools that are extremely good. And if people of color are allowed to go, I mean, they are. There were, these were fought battles, and people were bused to these regions. And when the schooling was good, there was absolutely no problem. The students did extremely well, regardless of their, sort of any other factor. So what neoliberal policies do for us is to privatize and make whatever is essential out of the reach of large numbers of people, right? So in that sense, for me, that's a very big problem. But I suspect you're also thinking in terms of once you've graduated, how do private industries fare compared to the government in terms of giving jobs to subaltern, sort of genders and castes, right?
We were actually looking at both, ma'am. We were also looking into how the government is receding from their duty of providing education, like the private sector is overtaking them in that, and also how these people who graduate from STEM institutions are not finding a place in the private sector due to their non-acknowledgement of the need for reservations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal situation, in some ways, there is a way in which, people have argued that under capitalism, it should not matter. Your gender should matter. It's your competence that matters. But that has not ever been the case, as we know. We know that all kinds of issues come into play, at least. So what you were saying earlier, that at least in the government jobs, there is some reservation. So there's some ways in which there's greater avenues available for joining the government jobs. And they have been important as a step up. And the fact that more and more are going to be privatized would mean that there would be greater discrimination, not less. Right? That's what I guess, that's what you were trying to get at. And I think
yes, ma'am. That was exactly what we were intending.
I would agree with you, because it's a complicated argument as to why they will not want to, hire merit. But as my earlier part of my talk was that the mindset, and there have been a lot of research recently about what is called implicit bias, that people, when they do not see women or people of color or subaltern or Dalits, etc., in higher positions, they kind of implicitly assume that they cannot be in that position. So these tests, the implicit bias tests, actually are associations. And if you have a science, related fact, and if you associate it with a man's name or a woman's name, the response times are really much more if you had to pair a woman or a Dalit, for instance, with certain merit, right? Because people implicitly assume that they cannot do the job, or so they will not associate that qualification with that as social status. So in that sense, how do we get over that implicit bias is by actually by having greater and greater representation. So it's a cyclical problem, but you don't get hired because people hiring you have all these biases in their heads, which has been hammered into their heads for centuries, I would say. And so there is a lot of education that needs to be done, and a responsible, good governance, a government that is committed to equality truly, should be able to address that, should be able to, I look at the example of Cuba, much maligned in the US as a autocratic state, etc. In Cuba, after the Cuban Revolution, within 1 year, they had achieved 100% literacy. 1 year. It's a tiny country. They enlisted large numbers of people, young people, to go and teach, and the government was determined to do it, and they were able to do that. And if you look at Cuba right now, it's they export doctors all over the world. Their music, creative arts, science is really quite phenomenal, given that it has been under US embargo for such a long time. So the state, because it has huge amounts of resources, is able to, if they want to, make changes that are lasting, and they can do it quite quickly. But the point is that we have been really, caste continues to plague us. The Constitution is against caste discrimination. It should be against caste, period. At least that's what I believe. Because there are all kinds of discriminatory practices that keep, communities aloof, etc. And when communities are aloof, they also have very disproportionate allocation of resources, right? If you think about it, and class plays a very big role in that. So if we want to really be a really truly democratic nation, we have to make sure that we have more equitable distribution of resources, which means better educational facilities, better medical facilities, etc. The inequality in the world and in India is just staggering right now, right? And that has been a gift of the neoliberal framework, the extraordinarily high levels of inequality that we see in the world today. Anyway, that's a very long answer to, so I don't have much faith in privatization and thinking that these things will disappear once we have privatization and only merit. Sure.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I think we'll take questions from the audience. Ma'am, shall we?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. So we'll be asking the questions in the order of whoever posted the questions first. So, ma'am, the first question was from P. Mortike. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this word correctly. It's P. Mortike. The question is, it is said that the privileged scientists made science to lose its objectivity, and that it is not surprising, as Thomas Kuhn would have said and written, because science is done by people. So the oppressed can also take science, so that science is democratized. That is political action. But I would like to ask one specific question. That is, do science itself have any potential to abolish caste?
No, I agree. I mean, the first part of the comment I agree with completely, is that it's people who do science. So while there is, sort of the notion of objectivity has to be thought of a bit more carefully. And in my work, I often think of this Mobius strip, which you turn it around, so you are the inside of the surface, and then suddenly you find yourself on the outside. So that's the way in which I think about science also, that it is within a tiny experiment that you're doing, there is objectivity. You're looking at data, hopefully, you're collecting data in a so-called unquote objective way, but the interpretation of that data is quite subjective and depends a lot on where one comes from, what our sensibilities are. And, my work has been largely on that score. So certainly there is subjectivity in the sciences as well. The second part of the question was what? What was the second part of the question? Could you read that?
Does science in itself have any potential to abolish caste?
Oh, the democratic potential of science. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, I mean, I think that there is enough evidence, scientific evidence even today, to say that there is no, there should be. I mean, you don't need science to abolish caste. Any senses, a humanistic way of looking at the world, you would want to abolish caste in any case. Of course, what science has told us recently, the genetic studies, and there's been very good work coming out of India, is that the castes were established pretty much. They got more rigid around 340 or something AD, right? Somewhere around that. So people created caste, and people can uncreate caste for sure. There is absolutely no scientific validity to having caste, right? If you're sort of the group, So anyway, I don't quite know what what the thrust of the question is. How can science abolish caste? Science can't abolish caste. It's people who have to abolish caste, no? I mean, science can tell us that there is no reason, no valid reason to have caste, right? So people share their genetic code. I mean, there's much greater similarity between people. Sorry, I'm going to just, yeah. So what I'm saying is that perhaps I'm not understanding the question properly, but the creation of caste was done for purposes, for discrimination, basically. And if you're going to, so there is, to my knowledge, there is no proof that there's scientific validity for caste. So I don't know. Anyway.
Ma'am, can we move on to the second question then?
Sure.
The second one was asked by Akash Datta. So the question is, why do you think there's more discussions around the issues of gender than that of caste in employers and institutions today? We have gender sensitization sessions, but not caste sensitization sessions. Why is that? And what does it mean for those wanting to change it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I often think about that in any case, because if you, if the affirmative action policies in this country, in the US, actually were much more beneficial for women than for, people of color. And I think that women are by virtue of, and I'm talking about upper caste women largely, by virtue of their, so they're both oppressed within gender relations, but also benefit from their class and caste positions, right? And so there's an opening for them because of those other privileges they have of class largely, and especially and that's not been necessarily the case in this country about Black women. No, so when we say women have benefited, or there's much greater tolerance or talk about gender inequity, and it's very similar in this country also. But now, with more, with the civil rights movement, there was some opening, and people, certain laws were changed, and there were some discussions, and then and in more recent years, as I was telling you, the Black Lives Matter protests have also opened up some spaces. So the reason for, in my head at least, why there is, why women have been able to make their case more strongly is because in some ways they are sort of intermediate, in terms of, because they do have certain privileges that come from being married to or being the daughter of upper caste people, and I think, and in this country, I know, I've studied it a little bit, and there's been, some women have been very good in terms of being very inclusive about issues of race, but others have kind of do not want to engage with it at all, because that would mean giving up some privileges. And I suspect it might be the same in India, where women are willing to talk about gender discrimination, but unwilling to include caste discrimination in their thing. So we have to work a lot, I guess. It's not, and again, that women itself is not an undifferentiated categories, right? Because they are further differentiated on the basis of class and caste. So my sense is that we have to kind of struggle. There are those who are going to be quite willing to see discrimination elsewhere also, women. But there are some who are going to be quite resolute in their opposition to organizing for against caste discrimination. So I think that we have to listen to voices of the most oppressed, and understand their condition, and take their leadership seriously, in terms of how, and that might be the way to usher in some kind of transformation. Yeah, but the reason why women are, there's greater acceptance of that is precisely because they have certain privileges, certain caste privileges, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Can we move on to the third question now?
Yes.
Ma'am, I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing this name incorrectly, but it was asked by Alekta Das. So the question is, the Higher Science Institute draw meritorious students who are academically well off, but sadly there is hardly any dialogue about scientific temperament and social issues among the students here. Why so, and how can the situation be?
You'll have to repeat it because your voice was getting cut.
Oh, okay, ma'am. Am I audible now?
Yes.
The higher education science institutes draw meritorious students who are academically well off, but sadly there is hardly any dialogue about the scientific temperament and social issues among the students here. Why is it so, and how can the situation be improved?
I see. So despite being meritorious, there is no, I mean, if I understand it correctly, that there's lack of scientific temperament. Is that what the question is? And why is that so? Yeah?
Yes, ma'am. How can it be scientific?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a I really don't have a very good answer for it, except that I think there has been a slow but steady decline in scientific temperament, in my opinion, over the last so many decades. You know, under Nehruvian times, you know, there was this big emphasis on creating scientific temperament, you know, against superstition and all of that. And then, you know, but as, you know, I mean, why does, I mean, I guess superstition is somewhat, quite integrally related, if not just somewhat, to religious beliefs, etc. And so as the country has gone more and more, I mean, I think the difference in my head, at least, is between you know, organized religion and spirituality. So in my thinking, what has seen huge advances or leaps is in organized religion. You know, you have this very public displays of religion, and religious sensibilities are easily hurt. And it has absolutely nothing to do with individuals' relations to spirituality and, you know, whatever they choose to believe in, you know, because to me, it's kind of, it could be nature, it could be something that, you know, you have an understanding that the world out there, the nature out there is much larger and much more, you know, important than mere individuals. So that shift to institutionalized religion has given rise to all kinds of you know, irrationalities, I would say, you know, I mean, and again, you know, I mean, these are become cliched neoliberalism, etc. But I think neoliberalism, where everything is privatized, where everything is for money, so you can, you know, you create a lot of money doing religion, right? So scientific you know, Meghnad Saha wrote quite movingly about it. He's saying that once you understand what causes eclipse, you know, then it would be scientifically dishonest to still go and you know, sort of bow your heads in front of Ketu, or you know, whatever the story is behind eclipse as to what causes eclipse. So but right now we are just seeing a complete coexistence of deeply superstitious beliefs on the one hand, and on the other, you know, sort of as you know, science, which really kind of is trying to understand how you know, how the world works in a way. So so I think that that you know, religion, if it's a personal belief system, you know, I myself am not I'm not a believer, but at the same time, the impact, the uncritical, and that's why I want to separate spirituality from religion, because people may genuinely feel the need to be spiritual, but what it has become is yet another way in which to market things. Religion becomes another vehicle for, you know, creating markets, and therefore it has actually spread, it's not been curtailed, it has rather gotten much worse, in my opinion, in terms of the beliefs that people hold on to, or at least the rituals that people continue to do, which would be quite unscientific, quote unquote. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, do you want to add anything more? Hello?
Yes, yes. No,
Ma'am,
go ahead.
okay, ma'am. So since you were not getting a sense of engagement, we'll now like to open up the questions to the people who are asking it them itself. Uh, so I request all those who are asking questions. We'll be calling out the names in order, and I request all of them to stick to the questions, and follow-up questions are not really allowed. So I request Rennie Thomas to ask the questions which he has put up in the chat box. Is Rennie Thomas available? Is Rennie Thomas available? If
Yeah,
he's
hi,
not,
hi.
we'll ask
Can
the
you hear
question.
me?
Okay, you can ask the question.
Yeah, hi, Abba, how are you?
Where are you? I can't see you.
No, I don't think my video is working, but I'm just, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, I
Yeah,
see.
no, I just have a very, general two questions actually. So first is about the writing of history in India. So I was just thinking about, when we look at the archives to study the history of science in India, especially because of your work, the dispersed radiance. Do you think it's important to also look at the histories of what we call in STS as the everyday scientists? In the sense that have you come across histories and stories of subaltern scientists who were teaching in small towns and smaller colleges? So in that sense, what are the possibilities of writing of new history of science in India beyond elite institutions and established scientists? And that's just one question. And second is like, I'm just curious to know about the representation of, say, Dalit, Adivasi, and OBC scientists in the form of not just faculty, but also PhD and postdoctoral students in the US universities. Do we really have any data to know about that? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. The second question, I don't think so. I don't know that they, there are probably data on number of foreign students, etc., but I doubt that they kind of keep such detailed data about students from India here. So the answer to the second one would be no. And the first one about writing people's history of science, or how do we access that history, which, a long time ago, there was this series, it was intended for high school students, the Bharat Ki Ek Chhap. I don't know whether any of you saw that. It was a pretty ambitious project that they did. There was a series of, I think, 13 or 14 or some, number like that, videos created trying to trace history of people. And there they did, talk about, the way in which, the Damascus steel, which was actually made in India, the older forms of, how the artisanal castes had actually come up with very innovative ways of doing things. But unfortunately, that history is not readily available unless people do a lot of anthropological studies in terms of trying to figure out from different communities as to what were the practices, and look at that kind of work. In the modern history, I was just reading the other day People's History of Science, where they talked about, not just the big, scientist who gets credit for it, but huge numbers of people that made that science possible. So it's not an easy task, and one would need to be proficient in local languages and spend a lot of time and then try to trace, because people, the memory keeps on, the stories we tell each other continue, and there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge that is there in common people that we can explore. And so, but to my knowledge, I have not seen that work done. Have you come across people's history of science?
No, not much actually. That's the point. Especially, I think because we don't really have any archives for that. I mean, we do have a few anthropological studies, but not necessarily looking at those scientists who were teaching in these places. So there is no, available histories, biographies of the small town scientists. Essentially, they were teachers in small colleges and
Yes.
provincial towns. But I think their contribution is very significant in terms of science training for a particular generation of the time. So I
Yeah.
was just curious in that sense. Yeah.
And the whole system is so biased towards the big universities. I remember a friend of mine saying that they got a paper from some small town, a scientist working in Maharashtra or somewhere, where they had refuted some major theorem, etc. But I mean, so there are people who are trying all kinds of things, all by themselves, but that work never sees the light of day. In any case, so it's a monumental task, I would say, and but histories of like a lot of environmental history, for instance, I think some of it at least talks about the practices of different communities, and sort of tries to sort of incorporate those, and they're pretty scientific in to use that term in terms of their relationship to nature and how they tended to the flora and fauna around them, etc. So I think that it is a lived history that exists. So I don't think we'll find archives of it, but through storytelling, through lots of time spent, it is possible to recover these histories. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and we'll continue the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Reni.
Now I request Nigida Gupta if she is available to ask the question that she wanted to ask.
Hi, I got disconnected in between, so I can't see my question anymore. But I will try my best to stick to what I'd asked. It's related to what Akash said before about how gender issues are more talked about on campuses than caste. And I was wondering if there was a legal failing somewhere. So the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act mandates that you have a committee that looks at sexual harassment on every campus, and it describes how you should set up that committee, who all should be members on it. At least in my so I'm not from IIT Madras. In IISER Pune, the committee does a fair amount of good work. I was wondering if this is an example of law shaping the ethics in the community, and if something like that would help with caste, or your comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, committees are made of people, and people differ, and sort of. I've heard mixed reviews about. I mean, which is not to say that one shouldn't have the committees, but sometimes the committees themselves are much more interested in sort of not dealing with the problem directly. Rather, they are much more interested in keeping the reputation of the place alive. So it makes a big difference as to who is on these committees and what the upper administration, how far they're able to go. I mean, I remember at MIT several years ago in the early 90s, when the gender discrimination report came, the president was made it public despite advice by his own lawyers, and did everything to created institution-wide committees to look into issues. So that was very good, but equally there are many cases where are people who tend to just put a gloss over it and really not discuss, really do not institute real change in any way, shape, or form. So a lot of it, I think, I myself have much greater, sort of hope, I would say, in the ability of students to organize and demand change. You make it impossible for the authorities to not be able to say no. And unfortunately, there's a lot of divisiveness in the student bodies or whatever, whichever group we are talking about. But the pressure, without pressure, grassroots pressure, I think the authorities, the powers that be, do minimum that is required. That's been my reading of the institutional response to these things. Of course, as I said, there are real fundamental changes that can be brought about, certainly. And so the involvement of, we have to, there's a lot of educational work that needs to be done, amongst our fellow students or colleagues, etc. And that struggle is kind of has to be continuously mounted, because there are otherwise, these committees are very important. But I think they have to be peopled by those who are genuinely concerned about these issues, and
Right.
often that's not the case, it turns out. So,
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Now I request Subhash Arya to ask the question that he wanted to ask.
Hello, madam. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for excellent talk on caste and science, on social representation in STEP research institution. I'm listening you first time, and you are in MIT. I feel very proud, and you have paid attention. Basically, caste discrimination in higher education system in India. So I thank you too, as well as organization who have given us opportunity to listen to you. One thing, and second thing, that I have observed that the book written by you, I was just searching on Naviana as well as on Amazon. I could not find, it is not available. So madam, please look into that. Just as soon as you have drawn attention on that book. And now I'm coming on the question, madam, that in IITs, there is 1 year preparatory program for SC/ST category students, particularly those who could not qualify IIT JEE main exam with requisite criteria. So before entering into that actual 4-year BTech program, they used to go for 1 year preparatory courses. So, madam, may you explain the effect of this program on overall development of SC/ST students as an engineer or scientist with, particularly in affective domain? They may be getting advantage in what is called cognitive learning, and even is say other field. But what is effect on affective domain on students? SC/ST students. Over to you, madam. Thank you so much.
Oh, you mean the preparatory course, as to what effect it has on students?
Yes.
I honestly, I can imagine that. I think that at MIT they have a very similar program, not for a whole year, but in the summer they have these courses that, or they're not. There are organizations that come and then they do fun things and try to address whatever lack there may be in educational preparedness, and so they run that program, and I think it's quite successful in terms of how students do but they are already admitted, I think, the students.
Yes, madam. In IITs, for SC/ST students, suppose three courses are there: physics, chemistry, and mathematics. out of 3 SC/ST category student, if is not able to qualify, say 1 course and 2 course he could qualify, then he or she get the admission into IITs, but 1 year they are gone under preparatory, means physics, chemistry, maths. Again they are supposed to taught by the IIT faculties only. But what happened? It's my personal experience when I was in teaching in one of IITs, IIT Islamabad. They are I feel that they have been segregated and they have been looked down, and moreover the faculties who those supposed to teach rigorously, they are not teaching. It seems that they are unwanted because it is other than their 4-year BTech program. Sometimes it is an extra burden. This is my observation. I may be wrong.
No, I think.
And psychology wise also there is an effect of those students. Okay, for other students this is a 4-year program. For SC/ST it is a 5-year program. Somewhere. And the result of those courses, preparatory courses, I have not observed that it is really uplifting the level of students, those who are coming into once they are coming into first year, say, or so on. So on this matter, I would like to know your opinion, whether any researcher have gone through, have studied, because since long time this must be carrying forwarding. Now I'm not in IIT, I'm now in the Central University.
Nice.
Over to you, madam. Thank you.
No, I think that I sort of see your point about the additional segregation, that you're already in some ways you're marking students, and that stigma, because all these IITs are very fond of talking about merit all the time, so that can have a very lasting impact on people. So the question, I mean, a lot of studies here sort of seem to suggest that if there is group study and people help each other through clarifying concepts, they're in the informal atmosphere, not inside a class, but and that really improves, or it really is very useful to those who are participating in this joint study groups. So if there was a real way, I mean, people come from very different backgrounds, very different schooling. So language is a big problem also. So, but what is true is that there is a lot of desire to learn, and it needn't be through segregation, but it could be sorry, through study groups together, with the caring professors or lecturers or teachers, that might be a better way of doing it, rather than segregating and putting a stigma already on it. So, but there you need a lot of will. There has to be a recognition that there is, you have to get over people's implicit biases that we were talking about, and the way in which already when people come in there, or people who seem to know who is in a reserved category, and therefore their whole persona, their whole attitude towards the students would be quite different. I do know of certain studies in this country where with the help of really caring professors and these study groups, creation of these study groups, there was no difference in performance. That disappears very, very quickly. Yeah, so that might be a better way of doing it. So yeah.
And madam, comments on your availability of book?
My availability.
A book.
Of the book. Oh, you should write to sort of. There was a bookstore in Delhi that used to have the books that I've sent. But you should talk to S. Anand of Navyan, and say maybe he should bring out a paperback edition. If enough people write to him, it might happen.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I could. Otherwise, I could. Yeah.
I would like to inform everyone that we won't be taking any more questions. We have two questions from Shubha and Dayal. I request Shubha to ask her the question.
Okay.
Hi, thanks, Abha, for the wonderful talk. So my question is from a personal experience that when lower caste students approach their PhD supervisors in IIT with concerns of caste discrimination, we are often dismissed as too emotional or paranoid, and we don't have anyone to share similar experiences with. So we are often, called out, or like our experiences are often questioned. So do you think we can sensitize our supervisors or co-workers in the lab and within the institute through dialogue? Or do we have to wait until there is proper democratic representation in STEM? Thank you.
No, I hope you don't have to wait, because you'd be waiting a long time. Yeah, I think that, one of the things that in choosing the supervisor, that's, you have the choice, right, to choose the supervisor? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have.
I think that that's where, one should pay a lot of attention to. A lot of the time people just, because we don't know, now when I'm on the other side, I have a much better appreciation of, how to choose an advisor. But what would be useful in this time when things are, sort of, to choose a advisor that is sympathetic, that one could talk to. And there have to be, I can't imagine that in every institution there are professors who are, very deeply committed to notions of equality. So my sense would be to spend some time talking to your other seniors, etc., to see who are the people who are more sympathetic. And then secondly, there is also a lot of virtue in creating student support groups amongst yourselves, to try and address some of these problems, because you have to make noises. Otherwise, if you suffer in silence, then it doesn't help you, or I meant you as a generic you, and it's so I'm all about organizing even small groups of people, 2 or 3 or 4, somebody to talk to, and then you could sort of make a representation together and try and move things. But yeah, it's you can't wait till the whole institution gets more democratic. You have to be able to try to and to, I don't know, at MIT there's a not necessarily academic staff, but staff that is concerned about these issues. There are equity committees, and there are places where students of who feel discriminated against, or who feel unwelcomed, do have spaces to go to and discuss, and have some adults helping them out. So we need to create those structures, as well as nothing like organizing among students and trying to create a list of people that you shouldn't be working with, period, and some who are more desirable. Yeah, that's in the interim period. That's what would work, I would think. Yeah.
Ma'am, Dayal is experiencing connectivity troubles, so I'll ask question on his behalf. Professor Gopal Guru has made an interesting publication between theoretical Brahmins and empirical Shudras when talking about the question of caste in the social census in India. Do you such a division of stems that helps in caste?
You're getting cut off. Could you just start again? Sorry. You were the voice
Uh, Professor Gopal has made an interesting classification between theoretical Brahmins and empirical Shudras when talking about the question of caste in the realm of social sciences in India. Do you think such division of intellectual labor that helps in preserving caste errors?
So theoretical Brahmins and empirical Shudras. I still didn't get the question. So does this, this is Gopal Rao, who, right?
Am I audible now?
No, your voice is getting a bit choppy. Is it on the chat that I could look at, the question?
Yes, ma'am. It is on chat. It was raised at 7:45.
I see. I'm sorry, I'm getting the beginning of the question, but not the end. What is the question? That in his formulation, what was it? Please ask again.
He's asking such a classification exists in STEM research as well, such a classification of intellectual labor.
What of intellectual labor? What about intellectual labor?
I will repeat the question. Can you hear me?
Sorry, Subha, are you trying to tell me the question?
Yes, yes. So Dayal has asked, Professor Gopal Guru has made an interesting classification between theoretical Brahmins and empirical Shudras when talking about the question of caste in the realm of social sciences in India. Do you think such division of intellectual labor exists in the fields of STEM research that helps in preserving caste hierarchies?
I see. Oh, so is there a differentiation in STEM fields vis-a-vis? No, you know, I personally don't have any such knowledge. You know, there was always in the past, you know, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, people talked about the ways, you know, the way you formulated this question about how people in scientists or social scientists in India would gather the data, and the theory would be in the US or in England, etc. So there was a completely unequal relationship. You know, that's what the theoretical Brahmin and empirical Shudra, you know, metaphor comes from, because that was the way research was carried out, because a lot of field work was done by Indian, you know, political scientists or historians, etc. And then the theory would be provided by the West. So whether that is transferable to what is happening in Indian laboratories is not clear to me. It is somewhat true that there is the way in which theoretical knowledge is the epitome of, you know, pure abstract thinking, and therefore its association with Brahmanism might well be very, you know, strong in the minds of people. But I actually don't know enough about the, you know, whether such a strong division exists, because till very recently the numbers have been fairly low, no, in terms of you know, Dalit scientists and SC/ST representation in science. I really wouldn't know. But I think the kind of differentiation that exists between theory and experiment, there is slight differentiation, but not the kind of stark differentiation that existed in social sciences. between, those who made theory sitting in the West and the data, the field workers who created all the data for that theory to happen. I don't know that the division in the sciences, especially now in biological sciences, you really, I think without experiments, the theory is fairly, I don't think that the theoreticians are given any higher status in biology. It varies from field to field. Sorry, I don't think that this, it's easily transferable to the sciences, maybe in some fields more than in some others, perhaps in physics, but certainly not in biology or chemistry for that matter.
Now, ma'am, I think we are with the questions now. So, ma'am, hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, so thanks a lot for joining us here today, and the talk was really enlightening, and thanks for spending so much time posting all the questions. I would also like to thank Dr. P.K. who is not here with us at the moment, but who really gave a good start of your entire discussion. And we'll be actually, this is, as mentioned before, this will be a this is the third part of the series of lectures which we are holding on the same issue, and we'll be having a talk on gender issues on 11th. The details will be updated soon. And that will be followed by a discussion by Sadish Deshpande on 5th. The discussion 11th, the discussion on the of gender in science research, and Dr. Prajwal Shastri and Dr. Vinita Bal will be holding the discussions, and it will take place on 11th December, and the links, timings, and all will be released later through our social media page. I request everyone to attend the same. And again, on 5th December, we have a discussion by Sadish Deshpande. We are yet to get the details from him about the timing, so it will be updated soon on our social media page. I request everyone who has attended the meeting today to attend the rest of our speeches, rest of our talks. So, ma'am, once again, thanks a lot for this discussion.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks.
This meeting is for over.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a ton. Yeah, bye. It was very good to meet all of you.
Thank you, madam. Bye.